Hey folks, tonight we're diving into a topic that's less about deep philosophy and more about deliciously questionable life choices: medieval junk food. Yes, even in a world without drive-thrus or vending machines, our ancestors still found ways to snack. And let me tell you, their creations range from "why didn't this survive" to modern times, to "what were they thinking?" Before you get too comfortable, do me a solid. Hit that like button if you enjoy these historical deep dives, and subscribe if you want more stories from the past. Drop a comment about where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim those lights, maybe turn on some ambient noise, and let's time travel together to the world of questionable medieval munchies. In an era where most snacks looked suspicious and tasted worse, apple fritters were the medieval equivalent of hitting the culinary jackpot. Sweet, piping hot, and slightly dangerous, just like every good life choice back then. These golden discs of joy were basically medieval donuts, minus the food safety regulations and Instagram-worthy frosting. So what went into these medieval treats? Apples, obviously, but not your shiny supermarket varieties. Think gnarly, tart little things that grew behind the tavern and may have been liberated from a neighbor's tree. They'd chop these up, toss them in a rough batter of flour, eggs, and sometimes ale, because water was sketchy and ale made everything better. Then into the fryer they went. Deep frying in the 1300s was its own special kind of theater. The oil, usually recycled pig fat, had seen things. It was reused until it practically qualified for medieval citizenship. This well-seasoned oil added what we'll generously call character to the fritters. The result? Something crispy, hot, and weirdly addictive. Fresh out of the cauldron, these fritters were little pockets of joy, crispy edges giving way to soft centers, with just enough risk of third-degree burns to keep things exciting. If you were fancy, yours might get dusted with imported sugar, the ultimate flex. For us peasants, a drizzle of honey or spice syrup had to do. Either way, it was sweet enough to make you forget the rest of your diet consisted mostly of cabbage pretending to be other foods. These were the original street foods, grabbed at fairs, after church, or on market days when you needed a treat and didn't mind grease stains on your tunic. Kids loved them, adults pretended not to love them as much as they did, and birds would straight up mug you for them. Were they sometimes burnt? Sure. Were the apples occasionally more sour than sweet? Absolutely. But when they were good, when they were good, you suddenly understood why people put up with medieval life. If apple fritters were the medieval donut, then cheese curds were their popcorn, bite-sized, squeaky, and wildly inconsistent. These weren't fancy artisanal cheeses. They were made fast, eaten faster, and expected to survive journeys that would kill lesser foods. Basically baby cheese before it grew up into something you could build walls with. Farmers made them by separating milk into curds and whey using rennet, which sounds fancy until you learn it came from baby animal stomach linings. The result? Sometimes soft, sometimes rubbery, always with that weird squeak between your teeth that made you question your life choices. But in a world where snacks usually meant stale bread or cold broth, cheese curds felt like winning the dairy lottery. Monks hoarded them, travelers packed them, kids treated them like medieval gummy bears, assuming the cows had cooperated that week. You could fry them, crumble them on stews, or just eat them by the handful while pretending you didn't smell like a barn. Unlike most medieval foods, curds didn't need a special occasion. They were just there, reliable as that one friend who shows up with questionable life advice at 2 a.m. Did they sometimes taste off? Sure. But in an era without refrigeration, your standards adjusted quickly. Plus, they were excellent for bribing both cats and small children, the original medieval currency of affection. Now let's talk about the medieval culinary crime that was turnip pie. Let's be clear, turnips are not dessert. But in a world where sugar cost more than some people made in a year, medieval cooks looked at a turnip and said, "What if we baked it?" The result was exactly as questionable as it sounds. At its best, it was mashed turnips, hopefully cooked, mixed with egg, maybe some honey or dried fruit if the cook was feeling generous, all baked in a crust made of flour, water, and sheer determination. At its worst, well, Let's just say livestock might have turned their noses up at it. These pies existed for two reasons. Turnips were cheap, and pie crust could hide a multitude of culinary sins. Whether the turnips were overripe, undercooked, or just plain bitter, once baked into a pie with enough honey drizzle, it became peasant cuisine with aspirations. Was it cheesecake? No, but it tried, and in medieval Europe, trying counted for a lot. You'd find these at fairs, feast tables, and monasteries where monks had too much time and too many root vegetables. Some recipes added spices, if the abbey was rich, pepper, if the cook was chaotic, or even raisins, which just confused everyone. Nobles didn't eat this unless they were slumming it for political points. But for everyone else, it was dessert, sort of. More like sweetened resignation with a pastry crust. If medieval comfort food had an MVP, it was the meat pasty, basically a hot pocket with more danger and better life choices. A handheld pie stuffed with meat, a term used very loosely, tucked into a folded crust, and baked until golden or slightly charred, depending on the cook's attention span. The beauty was in its portability. Eat it on the road, in the fields, or while watching public executions, whatever your day required. The thick crust kept contents warm and protected from dirt, rats, and the occasional peasant sneeze. Now about that filling. If you were near a manor, you might get actual pork or venison. If not, well, options expanded dramatically. Rabbit, pigeon, eel, hedgehog, anything that once moved could be diced, seasoned, and hidden in pastry with plausible deniability. Spices helped mask questionable meat that had been resting a bit too long. There were even vegetarian versions for fasting days, filled with root vegetables or cheese. But let's be real, the meat ones were the crowd pleasers, greasy, hot, and comforting in that don't ask questions way. People sometimes marked crusts with initials, especially minors, or left thick edges to hold with dirty hands before tossing to rats. Were they good? Sometimes. Mysterious? Always. But that was part of the charm. You didn't eat a meat pasty to feel safe. You ate it because it tasted good, and you were ready to accept the consequences. In a world where brushing your teeth meant swishing wine and hoping for the best, candied fennel seeds were the medieval equivalent of breath mints. Tiny, sugary, and packed with enough herbal punch to make your mouth feel fresh-ish. These little guys pulled triple duty, part treat, part digestive aid, part dental hazard, all wrapped up in one oddly satisfying crunch. The process was surprisingly fancy for medieval times. Each seed got coated in a hard sugar shell. No small feat when sugar itself was an imported luxury that had to be boiled, beaten, and poured by hand. This meant someone out there really believed in the power of these tiny flavor bombs. They were especially popular among nobles who'd hand them out after dinner, like medieval after-dinner mints, probably to distract from the mutton breath lingering in the air. Flavor-wise, imagine licorice decided to start a fight with your taste buds. The fennel seeds packed an herbal punch that divided crowds. You either loved them or pretended to swallow them whole while nodding politely. The sugar coating helped, but there was no escaping that distinctive kick that made you feel both fancy and slightly confused. But these seeds weren't just about fresh breath. Medieval folks believed fennel helped settle stomachs, especially after those legendary feasts featuring 3 types of roasted bird and enough mead to drown a small village. Think of them as the medieval combo of chewing gum and antacids, with a 50% chance of chipping a tooth if you bit down wrong. And oh, they were hard. We're crack-a-molar if you're not careful hard. Eating candied fennel seeds was basically an extreme sport. You'd test one cautiously, listen for cracking sounds, then commit fully if your teeth survived the initial inspection. The rich treated them like medieval tic-tacs, popping them casually between conversations about jousting and taxation. Common folks got knockoff versions sweetened with honey and crushed herbs. Not quite the same, but good enough for pretending. While they didn't fill your stomach, candied fennel seeds left your mouth feeling pleasantly tingly and gave you that all-important medieval illusion of sophistication. Even if you were covered in mud and had goose grease stains on your tunic, popping a few of these made you feel like nobility, at least until the herbal aftertaste kicked in. If medieval desserts had a golden child, honey cakes would win by a landslide. Sweet, dense, and sticking to everything except your expectations. These were what happened when bakers got ambitious, but sugar was still locked up in royal treasuries. Honey was the people's sweetener. Assuming you had access to bees or were willing to risk getting stung in the face stealing from someone else's hive. The recipe was simple: flour, water, and generous glugs of honey, or what passed for generous when spoons were mostly used as weapons against siblings. The result? A sturdy slab that could either be dessert or a doorstop, depending on how long it sat near the fire. At best, it was warm, chewy comfort food. At worst, well, let's just say some honey cakes probably got repurposed as building materials. When feeling fancy, bakers might add spices: nutmeg if the household was rich, cloves if they wanted to show off, cinnamon if they were trying to impress the neighbors. Dried fruits sometimes made appearances too, unless the local kids had already stolen them for their own snacks. These cakes were festival favorites. They could be made ahead of time, survived being dropped or thrown in food fights, and didn't spoil quickly. Basically the medieval equivalent of indestructible party snacks. They also served as gifts, bribes, and occasionally passive-aggressive statements. Here, I made this for you. It's sweet, unlike your personality. Structurally, these weren't delicate pastries. Cutting them required serious knife skills and the hope that no one was watching you struggle. Eating them was easier. Just don't expect fluffy bites. These cakes were built for medieval life. Tough, durable, and coated in enough honey to make your hands feel like you'd lost a fight with a beehive. But when done right, pure magic. That first bite of warm honey cake made all the cabbage-heavy meals worth it. They tasted like rare moments of indulgence in a world where treat yourself usually meant not getting dysentery this week. The cakes weren't just food. They were edible joy wrapped in sugar and stubbornness, with just enough chew to count as a jaw workout. Now let's talk about the medieval snack that sounds like a bad idea, but somehow worked: fried fish skin cracklings. Crispy, salty, and unexpectedly addictive. These were the ultimate waste-not food from a culture that also thought eel pie was a brilliant concept. No one set out to invent this. Some thrifty cook probably just stared at a pile of fish skins and thought, what if we fry them? And thus, history was made. Coastal towns and riverside villages became crackling hotspots. After processing fish, the meat went to stews, the heads went to cats, and the skins straight into sizzling oil until they crisped up like nature's potato chips. The result was surprisingly delicious. Thin, crunchy strips that tasted like the ocean decided to throw a party in your mouth. A pinch of salt elevated them. Garlic or herbs made them gourmet by medieval standards. These weren't just tasty, they were practical. Lightweight, non-perishable-ish, and packed with fat. They were the perfect energy boost after hauling firewood or defending sheep from other sheep. Soldiers packed them, sailors lived on them, and peasants sold them outside taverns to drunk patrons who wouldn't notice the occasional scale still attached. The only downside: the smell. These things could announce their presence from 3 huts away. Fry up a batch indoors, and your home would smell like Poseidon's gym socks for a week. But you'd be forgiven, because once people tasted them, all complaints went out the window. When medieval life gave you stale bread and warm beer, you didn't cry. You made ale-soaked bread, the original comfort food that made French toast look fancy. Known by various charming names like soups or trencher toast, this was survival cuisine at its most basic. Take yesterday's bread, the kind that could double as weaponry. Dunk it in ale, not the fancy kind, the brewed in someone's questionable backroom variety, and let it soak until it transformed from jawbreaker to something vaguely edible. Was it good? With low expectations and the right lighting, sure. Warm, bready, and carrying that distinct fermented grain bitterness that said this won't kill you, probably. This was working class fuel, quick, hearty, and just messy enough to feel like a proper break from daily chores. Sometimes people dressed it up with herbs, cheese, or if they were really lucky, a fried egg. On special occasions, you might get soups soaked in spiced ale, which basically meant the cook found some ancient nutmeg and got creative. Like most medieval foods, this served dual purposes. Stale bread too hard to chew. Soak it. Ale starting to turn. Pour it on bread and call it a feature. Waste was for rich folks with too much food anyway. The only downside, it didn't travel well. Once soaked, the bread turned into a mushy sponge that somehow managed to be both soggy and dense at the same time. But for a chilly evening by the fire, nothing beat a bowl of ale-soaked bread and the illusion of culinary satisfaction. If you thought medieval nobility stopped at candied seeds for their after-dinner treats, think again. The upper class had another bizarrely specific snack up their embroidered sleeves: sops and wine. This was the medieval equivalent of a deconstructed dessert, where toasted bread met fancy wine in a bowl, creating something that hovered between culinary innovation and desperate pantry raid. The concept was simple enough. Take bread, ideally not completely petrified, toast it lightly, then drown it in sweet, spiced wine. Not just any wine, mind you, but the good stuff that had been sitting in clay jugs since last harvest season, developing character. Once sufficiently soaked, this boozy bread pudding was served as a soft, spoonable delicacy that nobles called refined, while everyone else quietly wondered if the royal chefs had simply run out of ideas. When executed well, wine sops were warm, comforting, and just intoxicating enough to make awkward dinner conversations tolerable. The wine added depth, the bread provided texture, and the spices gave the illusion that you were eating something fancier than soggy toast in a bowl. When done poorly, well, let's just say some medieval servants probably risked execution by discreetly scraping plates into the moat. These made regular appearances at banquets, late-night feasts, and those painfully formal dinners where no one wanted to discuss politics. Instead, nobles passed around bowls of alcohol-soaked bread while making strained small talk about falconry and the weather. Some versions got fancy with additions like dried fruits, nuts, or even cheese, at which point it stopped being a snack and became a culinary guessing game of what did the cook throw in this time. Peasants had their own versions too, swapping expensive wine for cheap vinegar or ale. For them, this wasn't dessert, it was dinner, breakfast, or whatever you called a meal that left you both full and deeply confused about culinary standards. Yet somehow, wine sops persisted through the ages, warm, filling, and just boozy enough to make medieval life slightly more bearable. Now let's talk about the original trail mix, medieval dried fruit. In an era before preservatives and vacuum sealing, drying fruit was one of the few ways to preserve nature's candy for later. But this wasn't your modern snack aisle variety. Medieval dried fruit had one job: survival. Taste was optional, texture was aggressively chewy, and dental damage was practically guaranteed. The usual suspects included raisins, figs, dates, and if you were really fancy, imported prunes. These were fruits that had been sun-dried, smoked, or in some cases, simply forgotten on a windowsill until they stopped being moist. Wrinkled, tough, and alarmingly dense, they were like edible time capsules from last year's harvest. The upside? Intense sweetness that made them medieval candy. The downside? Chewing them felt like fighting your own jaw muscles. Nobles loved them, monks hoarded them, and children treated them like rare loot from the kitchen. Some got repurposed in pies or porridge, while others were eaten straight as precious treats. Rich folks might wrap them in pastry or soak them in wine like they were trying to impress foreign dignitaries. For commoners, getting dried fruit was a special occasion, a holiday, wedding, or that one day a year when someone remembered you existed. Storage was simple, cloth sacks or clay pots worked fine. They hardened over time, sure, but that just turned them into longer-lasting snacks, or potentially lethal projectiles if you had annoying siblings. In short, medieval dried fruit was sweet, luxurious, and faintly dangerous. The kind of snack that stuck with you, sometimes literally, for days. Now we arrive at possibly the most hardcore medieval snack, blood pudding balls. Imagine if sausage rolls and protein shakes had a medieval love child, and you're close. Born from the waste not philosophy, these dense, iron-rich spheres prove that every part of the animal could be repurposed, even the blood. The process wasn't for the squeamish. Fresh animal blood, usually pig, got mixed with oats, onions, fat, and spices until it reached a consistency best described as morbid porridge. This got shaped into balls and fried until the outside crisped up like it had something to prove. The result? Dark, crispy orbs packing a rich, earthy flavor that's code for you'll be tasting iron for the rest of the day. Best served hot, though sometimes eaten cold if hunger outweighed common sense. These were protein powerhouses. Nobles might dress them up with pepper or serve them with eggs. Peasants, they were just happy not to be eating boiled cabbage again. Blood balls were practical, easy to carry, calorie-dense, and alarmingly filling. Eat 2 and you could skip lunch. Eat 4 and you were either a blacksmith or trying to win a tavern bet. These were fairground staples, sold at markets and roadside stalls where everything smelled like livestock and poor life choices. They were especially popular in winter when nothing warms you up like fried coagulation. Of course, they weren't for everyone. Some folks couldn't get past the texture, others the concept. But in a world where survival came before flavor, these meaty morsels earned their place in the medieval snack hall of fame. Medieval pancakes proved that some foods transcend time. Forget your fluffy modern stacks with maple syrup and whipped cream. These were thinner, tougher, and cooked in enough lard to make your arteries reconsider their life choices. But they got the job done, especially when your other breakfast option was sad soup that had given up on life. The recipe was humble: flour, eggs, and water or ale, because why not? Mixed into a batter and poured onto a sizzling iron griddle slick with pig fat. No nonstick pans, no measuring cups, just hope and whatever ingredients survived winter. The result? Flat, uneven circles with crispy edges and chewy centers. The kind of pancake that could survive a horseback ride and still be edible at journey's end. Flavor depended on what you had. A splash of ale added tang. Honey was luxurious. Herbs or onions made you feel adventurous. But mostly, it was just pancake and grease, served hot and inhaled like you were running from tax collectors. These were democratic food, eaten by peasants, nobles, monks, and merchants alike. Some layered them with cheese, others dunked them in broth, and the truly desperate just rolled them up and called it a day. During Lent and fasting periods, pancakes became loophole food, fried, filling, and somehow both humble and indulgent. Plus, they were excellent for disguising ingredients that had no business being in your mouth. While they might not win beauty contests, medieval pancakes had staying power. They didn't need praise, just a hot pan and a willing stomach. Somewhere between snack and sacrament came the medieval wafer, thin, crisp, and suspiciously light biscuits that walked the line between dessert and dental challenge. These were everywhere, outside churches, at village fairs, in the hands of monks, and occasionally floating in your soup like a holy crouton. Made from flour, water, eggs, and not much else, these were pressed between hot iron molds, like a medieval panini press, until they reached peak crispness. If feeling fancy, bakers might add honey or rose water, but most stuck to basics. The result? Something that looked like it belonged in a communion ceremony and tasted like crispy paper with aspirations. Wafers were the original fast food, portable, quick to make, and sold in bulk for profit. Vendors set up outside churches on feast days, waving stacks at parishioners like medieval snack carts. Often stamped with religious symbols or floral patterns, the designs didn't improve flavor, but gave you something to stare at while chewing and pretending this counted as dessert. Structurally delicate, they cracked if you looked at them wrong and shattered if you tried to share. Storing them was an art form, transporting them an adventure, and eating them outdoors. A high-stakes game involving crumbs, wind, and regret. Yet they remained beloved, light, crispy, and vaguely celebratory. For nobles, they came stacked with fruit or layered with soft cheese. For everyone else, sold by the dozen and eaten immediately before they turned to edible confetti. Let's talk about the medieval snack that sounds like a bad joke. Suck it. Even the name feels sticky. This was essentially fruit that had been boiled into submission, drowned in syrup, and preserved like a sweet little hostage. Imagine candied oranges, dates, or ginger coated in enough sugar to make your teeth vibrate. That was suck it in all its glorious excess. This wasn't peasant food. Oh no, this was elite-tier snacking, the kind of indulgence served in noble halls or given as gifts that said, I like you, but not enough to give you land. Sugar was crazy expensive, and fresh fruit wasn't always available, so suck it became the ultimate flex, proof that you had money to literally preserve sweetness. The process was intense. First, you'd boil your fruit, or ginger, in syrup, maybe honey if you were middle class, but real sugar syrup if you wanted to show off. Then drain it, let it dry slightly, and repeat the process multiple times because once wasn't enough. You weren't just making candy, you were waging war against moisture itself. The end result? Glossy, jewel-toned pieces that looked like edible treasure and tasted like concentrated summer. Some versions stayed soft and syrupy, served in fancy glass jars with silver spoons. Others dried into chewy cubes that got passed around on ornate trays like edible gold coins. Guests would take one piece, smile graciously, and immediately regret not pocketing 3 when no one was looking. Meanwhile, kitchen staff probably licked the cooking pots when the nobles weren't watching. Suck it wasn't just food, it was edible status symbol. Having it on your table showed you had access to trade routes, sugar imports, and at least one servant whose entire job was stirring things that didn't want to be stirred. It featured prominently at weddings, royal visits, and those awkward dinners where nobles tried to out-fancy each other. For commoners, they might glimpse it once a year at Christmas if the local lord felt generous. Now let's address the elephant, or rather, eel, in the room. Fried eel, the grand finale of medieval questionable cuisine. This was a dish so strangely beloved that it appeared everywhere from peasant huts to royal banquets without anyone stopping to ask, wait, should we really be eating this? But in an era before food safety regulations, eel was the ultimate versatile ingredient. Cheap, plentiful, and packed with protein, even if it looked like something that haunted sailors' nightmares. Preparing eel was an experience. First, you had to catch the slippery suckers, usually at night when they slithered through shallow waters like aquatic snakes. Then came the skinning, less like cleaning a fish and more like wrestling a greased rope that didn't want to die. Once subdued, the eels got chopped, seasoned, if you were feeling fancy, and tossed into sizzling fat until the skin crisped up into something almost appetizing. The result? A crunchy, savory bite with a rich, slightly oily flavor, like if calamari and chicken had a weird baby. Fried eel was festival food, tavern fare, and surprisingly, fasting food too, because apparently eel didn't count as meat in medieval religious loopholes. Monks ate it, nobles flaunted it, kings had it stuffed into pies that looked like culinary nightmares. Sure, it had bones upon bones, and yes, it sometimes wriggled long after death just to mess with you. But if you could get past that, and the lingering feeling you were eating a villain from a children's fable, fried eel was genuinely delicious. In our modern world of sanitized seafood, fried eel seems bizarre. But back then, it was a slippery little miracle that kept bellies full and menus interesting. From London to Venice, eel was the original street food, cheap, filling, and just dangerous enough to make eating feel like an adventure. Now let's zoom out from individual snacks to the bigger picture. How did these foods shape medieval society? Food wasn't just sustenance in the Middle Ages, it was a language. What you ate, how you ate it, and who you ate with spoke volumes about your place in the world. Apple fritters sizzling at a country fair said, life is hard, but we find joy. Honey cakes at a noble's table whispered, look how much sugar I can afford. Blood pudding balls shouted, we don't waste anything in this house. The preparation methods tell their own stories too. Medieval cooks were the original kitchen hackers, turning limited ingredients into survival and sometimes even delight through sheer creativity. No refrigeration? Ferment it, dry it, or fry it into submission. Grain getting moldy? Bake it into hardtack that could survive the apocalypse. Fruit going bad? Drown it in honey until it stops moving. Every recipe was a battle against time and spoilage, fought with spice racks and cooking fires. These foods also reveal medieval attitudes about health. What we call junk food today often had medicinal purposes back then. Candied fennel seeds aided digestion. Honey was considered good for coughs. Even fried foods had their place. The extra fat helped peasants survive harsh winters when crops were scarce. Nothing was just tasty. Everything served multiple purposes from nutrition to medicine to social bonding. The class divisions in snacking are particularly fascinating. Nobles might nibble delicate wafers while watching minstrels perform. Merchants enjoyed spiced nuts with their ale as they discussed trade routes. Peasants grabbed whatever they could carry to the fields, a hunk of cheese here, a dried fruit there, maybe a meat pasty if they were lucky. But across all levels of society, one truth remained. Good food made hard lives bearable, even if just for a meal. Perhaps most surprisingly, many medieval snacks survived well beyond their era. Pancakes evolved but never disappeared. Ginger eventually made its way into Christmas cookies. Even the concept of portable meat pies lives on in modern hand pies and empanadas. The flavors changed, the safety standards improved, but the human desire for convenient, comforting treats? That's remained constant for 1,000 years. So the next time you bite into a donut or grab a bag of chips, remember, you're participating in a tradition that stretches back to medieval fairs and castle kitchens. Our ancestors might not recognize the packaging, but they definitely understand the impulse to enjoy something fried, sweet, or salty after a long day. Some human experiences truly are timeless. Whether you're a 14th century peasant or a 21st century office worker, everyone deserves a little snack happiness. As the last crumbs of honey cake were brushed from medieval tables and the final sips of spiced wine warmed sleepy bellies, something magical happened across candlelit halls and straw-filled sleeping quarters. Dreams came calling. While we spent nights exploring the hearty flavors of medieval life, there's another feast that awaited our ancestors after the plates were cleared, a banquet of visions, symbols, and divine messages served straight to their sleeping minds. Tonight, we're trading our culinary time machine for a dream catcher as we explore how these same people who created blood pudding balls and candied fennel seeds also build entire systems for interpreting the mysterious language of dreams. Picture this. A medieval baker collapses into bed after a long day tending the oven, his fingers still sticky with honey and flour. As he drifts off, the familiar scents of his trade blend with strange visions, perhaps his prized apple fritters transforming into golden coins, or his bread dough rising to impossible heights. Come morning, he consults the local wise woman about these nocturnal messages, just as his ancestors had done for millennia. Because long before Freud and modern psychology, civilizations from Mesopotamia to medieval Europe saw dreams not as random brain activity, but as divine communiques flavored with meaning, as real and significant as the food they ate by daylight. Our journey begins where civilization first recorded its dreams, ancient Mesopotamia. Here, the Sumerians and Babylonians treated dreams like supernatural text messages, carefully archived on clay tablets and cuneiform script by 2500 BCE. Professional dream interpreters called Baru priests trained for years to decode these visions, consulting libraries of omen texts like the Ishkarzak Dream Manual. Their interpretations could alter the fate of kingdoms. A king might delay war after dreaming of floodwaters, while a merchant could cancel voyages over visions of broken wheels. Food appeared frequently in these ancient dream logs. Dates symbolized prosperity, rotting meat warned of disease, and strangely enough, eating cooked rodents meant you'd uncover secrets, a fact that makes medieval meat pasties seem almost tame by comparison. The Egyptians took this further, believing dreams could come from gods, ancestors, or even one's own spiritual double. Their Ramesside dream book read like a medical textbook crossed with a holy scripture. Some food-related interpretations still make us smile. Dreaming of eating crocodile flesh meant you'd become a high official, apparently nothing said promotion material, like munching sacred predators, while tasting honey in dreams foretold divine blessings. At healing temples, patients would sleep hoping the gods would visit their dreams with cures, sometimes receiving surprisingly specific dietary advice like avoid goose fat on Thursdays or drink barley water under a full moon. The Greeks transformed dream interpretation into something resembling science at their Asclepiads, healing temples where the sick underwent purification rituals before sleeping in sacred dormitories. Here, the god Asclepius might appear in dreams holding medicinal herbs or accompanied by his signature snakes, which probably felt less alarming than waking to find your medieval meat pie had developed sentience. Even practical-minded Hippocrates analyzed dreams for medical clues, noting that visions of flowing rivers might indicate kidney issues, a diagnostic approach that makes our modern food diary seem downright primitive. What's fascinating is how these ancient practices persisted into medieval times. The same monasteries that perfected cheese-making also preserved dream interpretation texts. The village wise women who advised on herb-infused remedies also explained why you dreamed of spoiled milk. And that baker fretting over his bread dough dreams? He was participating in a tradition stretching back to Babylonian temples, where priests once scanned the stars for messages just as carefully as he checked his oven's temperature. Perhaps it's no coincidence that many medieval dream symbols involved food: barrels of wine predicting abundance, rotten fruit warning of deceit, or eggs symbolizing new beginnings, unless they were cracked, which meant trouble. In a world where sustenance was never guaranteed, dreams naturally spoke the language of harvest and hunger. Just as a honey cake could sweeten a difficult life, a good dream might offer hope during lean times, both forms of nourishment for body and soul. So the next time you enjoy a modern snack before bed, remember, you're continuing a tradition that nourishes more than just the body. Whether it's a medieval baker dreaming of his next batch of apple fritters or a Babylonian priest interpreting visions of dates, humanity has always understood that some of life's most important flavors come not from our kitchens, but from the mysterious banquets served in our dreams. As we've seen how dreams and dining intertwined in the ancient world, let's now turn to where these nocturnal visions were most seriously studied: the dream temples of antiquity. These weren't just places of sleep, but sacred laboratories where the boundaries between medicine, religion, and the subconscious blurred in fascinating ways. Picture, if you will, a cross between a modern hospital, a luxury spa, and a divine message center. This was dream incubation at its height. The most sophisticated operations were the Greek Asclepians, healing sanctuaries dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine. Patients would arrive after days of purification, fasting on simple broths, bathing in sacred springs, offering honey cakes to the gods. By the time they reached the abaton, the dream dormitory, their bodies were cleansed and minds receptive. They'd sleep on special skins, surrounded by the faint scent of burning bay leaves, while priest-physicians observed like ancient sleep specialists. Some inscriptions claim miraculous cures: paralyzed limbs moving after dream visits from the god, or long-term pain vanishing after a spectral snake licked wounds and visions. But the real surprise? Modern science suggests these miracle cures might have genuine mechanisms. The fasting likely induced ketosis, now known to reduce inflammation. The mineral springs provided therapeutic soaks, and the ritualistic environment created powerful placebo effects. Even the snake lick visions correlate with known neurological responses to certain herbal remedies used in the temples. Essentially, these temples created the perfect biochemical and psychological conditions for healing, with dreams as the delivery system. Meanwhile, in Egypt, dream temples took on more bureaucratic precision. At the Temple of Thoth in Hermopolis, scribes kept meticulous records of dream interpretations like celestial accountants. They developed an entire taxonomy of dreams. Divine messages marked with hawk symbols. Medical diagnoses annotated with herb prescriptions. Prophetic warnings sealed with scarab stamps. Particularly vivid dreams might be recreated in hieroglyphs on temple walls, creating a shared dream archive where common symbols could be cross-referenced. It was crowdsourced dream analysis centuries before psychology existed. The Hittites added their own twist. Dream interpreters often worked in pairs, one analyzing content while the other tracked celestial events. A dream about falling stars during an actual meteor shower meant something different than the same dream on a clear night. Their lunar calendar of favorable versus unfavorable dream days would make even modern astrologers blush with its complexity. What's remarkable is how these traditions trickle down to everyday folk. Just as every medieval village had its baker and brewer, most had a dream interpreter too. Whether the local wise woman reading egg whites dropped in water, or the blacksmith who claimed dreams came clearer near his fiery forge, the methods varied wildly. Celtic seers slept on burial mounds. Norse Falvas used hallucinogenic mushrooms. Persian mystics stared into polished obsidian mirrors. Yet all shared the belief that dreams weren't just personal experiences, but messages needing translation, much like how a loaf of bread needed proper kneading to reveal its true nature. This democratization of dream interpretation meant that while kings might have their dreams analyzed with golden astrolabes, a farmer could still find meaning in his vision of a pregnant goat by consulting the village elder over shared ale and cheese. The tools of the trade were as varied as the interpreters themselves. Some used dream books, precursors to modern psychology textbooks filled with symbol interpretations. Others relied on divination aids. Mesopotamian priests used oil patterns in water. Egyptian seers studied the ripples in ceremonial wine. Greek oracle priests interpreted the smoke from burning barley cakes. All these methods shared a common thread: the belief that understanding dreams required both system and intuition, much like the alchemy of turning simple grains into nourishing bread or intoxicating ale. Whether through star charts or chicken entrails, humanity kept striving to crack the code of these nightly visions. As we'll see next, this obsession wasn't just about prediction or healing. Dreams became powerful political tools, capable of launching wars or legitimizing rulers. But that's a story best saved for when we've fully digested how deeply these ancient cultures believed in the language of dreams, a language as complex and nuanced as the most elaborate medieval recipe, and just as capable of transforming simple ingredients into something extraordinary. If dreams were considered private messages from the gods in everyday life, for kings and emperors, they became powerful political tools, carefully curated, strategically shared, and sometimes outright fabricated. In the ancient world, a well-timed dream could legitimize a ruler, justify a war, or undermine an enemy with terrifying efficiency. This was spin doctoring at its most divine. Take Alexander the Great, the master of dream propaganda. Before his conquest of Egypt in 332 BCE, he claimed to have dreamed of the god Ammon, ram horns gleaming, welcoming him as a son. When Egyptian priests at the Siwa oasis confirmed this vision conveniently after Alexander's military victories, it transformed him from foreign invader to divine pharaoh overnight. The message was clear. His campaign wasn't mere ambition. It was destiny written in the stars and conveniently interpreted by his personal seers. The Romans refined this tactic to a science. When Octavian, later Augustus, needed to undermine Mark Antony and Cleopatra, he spread word of a terrifying dream. A monstrous, multi-armed creature clearly representing Egypt, threatening Rome. By the time of the Battle of Actium, his troops were convinced they were fighting not just political rivals, but nightmare-born demons. After victory, Augustus minted coins depicting his prophetic dreams, ancient campaign ads stamped in silver. But manipulating dreams wasn't just for emperors. Ambitious nobles and rebels used them too. The Hebrew prophet Daniel's interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, a giant statue with feet of clay, wasn't just spiritual guidance, it was a thinly veiled critique of imperial instability. When Boudicca led her rebellion against Rome, she invoked dreams of ravens circling Roman forts, a brilliant bit of psychological warfare against superstitious soldiers. Even failed uprisings often began with leaders claiming dreams of victory. If they lost, well, the gods must have been testing them. What's fascinating is how these political dreams mirrored the food hierarchies we've explored earlier. Just as honey cakes were for nobles and coarse bread for peasants, dreams too were class-coded. Royal dreams, epic in scale, featuring eagles, celestial events, or gods handing swords/sculptures, always implied the ruler's divine right. Noble dreams, symbolic but practical, dreaming of overflowing granaries meant good tax revenue, while rotting fruit warned of disloyal advisors. Commoners' dreams, focused on survival. A dream of a pregnant goat meant healthy livestock. Dreaming of spoiled ale predicted a poor harvest. The machinery behind these interpretations was equally hierarchical. Kings had court oniricritics, dream experts, who'd deliver analyses on purple-dyed parchment. Merchants might consult temple priests for a fee. Peasants? They relied on folk methods, dropping lead into water to see what shapes it made, or baking dream bread with special herbs to induce visions. Religions quickly realized dreams' power to control behavior. The Egyptian dream stele, between the paws of the Sphinx, recorded how Prince Thutmose dreamed the god Harmachis promised him the throne if he cleared away sand, a brilliant bit of divine work ethic propaganda. In Mesopotamia, rulers installed dream chambers and ziggurats where priests would receive convenient visions about tax policies. Even the Bible's Joseph, originally an enslaved dream interpreter, rose to power by telling Pharaoh what he wanted to hear and stocking grain for 7 years of famine, proving some dreams did have practical value. But this system had a dark side. Just as spoiled meat could kill, false dream interpretations could doom entire nations. When the Babylonian king Nabonidus ignored his priest's warnings about dreams featuring crumbling city walls, they suggested military reinforcements. Cyrus the Great invaded within the year. The Roman Emperor Elagabalus was so obsessed with dream omens that he redesigned entire military campaigns based on his cook's nightmares, with disastrous results. Yet for all the manipulation, some dreams undeniably shaped history. The Carthaginian general Hannibal reportedly dreamed of a serpent destroying Roman fields before crossing the Alps with elephants, a vision that fueled his brutal campaign. Constantine's famous and Hoxenio Vince's dream of the cross before the Battle of Milvian Bridge didn't just win a battle, it converted an empire to Christianity. Perhaps the most telling detail? How these leaders framed their dreams after the fact. Successful visions were carved into stone or woven into tapestries. Failed prophecies? They vanished from records like bad leftovers scraped into the middens. In the end, ancient political dreams were less about truth and more about storytelling. The right vision, shared the right way, could bake legitimacy into a ruler's reign as surely as yeast lifts bread. And just as we've seen with medieval foods, the legacy of these dream politics lingers. Modern leaders still invoke visions for their campaigns, just less literally. Political advisors parse speeches for symbolic language. And every election season, someone inevitably has a dream about their opponent's downfall. The methods have changed, but the hunger for divine justification remains proof that humanity's oldest flavors of power still season our politics today. While kings and generals weaponized dreams for power, ordinary people across the ancient world were having their own nightly adventures, visions that shaped marriages, business deals, and even grocery lists. If royal dreams were the equivalent of medieval feasts, lavish, performative, politically charged, then commoners' dreams were more like daily bread, practical, nourishing, and sometimes surprisingly spicy. Take marriage prospects, for instance. A young woman in Babylon might dream of holding a clay jug, interpret it as pregnancy, and suddenly find her dowry negotiations accelerated. A Greek merchant dreaming of dolphins could take it as a sign to invest in shipping ventures, while his Egyptian counterpart seeing a flooded Nile might double his grain orders. These weren't superstitions, they were ancient risk assessment tools, the behavioral economics of their day. The real surprise? How many professions had dream cheat sheets? Farmers kept logs correlating dreams with harvests, dreaming of bees equals good honey season. Blacksmiths believed visions of molten metal predicted craftsmanship quality. Midwives used birthing mothers' dreams to guess complications, teeth falling out equals difficult labor. Even bakers, those purveyors of medieval comfort food, had their own dream lore. A loaf splitting cleanly in a vision meant prosperity, crumbling bread warned of debt. Some French millers reportedly refused to grind grain after dreaming of millstones cracking, an ancient workplace safety protocol. The domestic sphere brimmed with dream rituals, too. Newlyweds might place laurel leaves under their pillow to induce fertility visions. Persian households hung dreamcatcher-like charms woven from date palm fibers. Celtic families sometimes buried eggshells beneath doorsteps to filter bad dreams, a tradition that evolved into the nursery rhyme, Humpty Dumpty. But the most fascinating records come from ordinary people's diaries and letters. A Mesopotamian housewife's tablet complains, "Again I dreamed of my mother-in-law's pickled fish. Must I endure her cooking even in sleep?" A Roman soldier's letter to his sweetheart describes practicing sword moves in his dreams, while an Egyptian scribe's journal details stressed dreams about misplaced hieroglyphs. These personal accounts reveal something profound. Ancient people experienced the same dream themes we do today: anxiety, wish fulfillment, processing daily life, just through different cultural lenses. Where we might dream of missing a work deadline, they dreamed of failed olive harvests, modern teeth-falling dreams replaced by visions of crumbling mud bricks. The remedies for bad dreams were equally relatable. Beyond the standard amulets and prayers, people tried diet tweaks, avoiding cheese before bed, a Greco-Roman belief that persists today. Bedtime rituals, reciting prayers while holding a cup of barley water. Environmental fixes, repositioning beds to align with constellations. Some solutions were downright creative. Assyrian merchants inhaled lavender smoke to induce calm dreams before big deals. Egyptian scribes slept with limestone tablets under their pillows to banish writer's block nightmares. And in a precursor to modern sleep hygiene, Persian physicians recommended dream diets, light evening meals of figs and mint tea to promote restful sleep. Children's dreams received special attention. Clay tablets from Sumer describe parents interpreting their kids' visions of flying or giant animals. The Greeks believed children's dreams were pure prophecies, hence the tradition of dream incubation at temples for sick youngsters. A heartbreaking Babylonian letter tells of a father carrying his feverish son to sleep at Ishtar's temple, hoping for a healing dream. The workplace wasn't exempt either. We found dream logs from weavers noting how certain visions correlated with fabric patterns, potters recording kiln temperatures that produced creative breakthroughs in dreams, shepherds tracking wolf dreams against actual predator attacks. This data wasn't mystical, it was early pattern recognition. When 80% of your herders dream of wolves before an attack, you start taking those visions seriously. What emerges is a portrait of ancient dream life far richer than the stereotype of oracles and prophecies. These were people using dreams as a tool for navigating life's uncertainties, much like we use weather forecasts or financial planning today. The baker who changed his recipe after dreaming of perfect bread wasn't being irrational, he was engaging in intuitive problem solving. Perhaps most touching are the love stories preserved in dream records. A Greek sailor's letter describes dreaming of his wife's voice during a storm, which he took as a sign to turn back, avoiding a shipwreck. An Egyptian widow writes of feeling her husband's presence in dreams, as real as when he brought me dates from the market. In the end, these personal dream accounts give us something royal inscriptions never could, a glimpse into the hopes, fears, and quiet moments of ordinary ancient lives. They remind us that while history remembers the Alexanders and Cleopatras, it was the millers, mothers, and merchants processing their lives one dream at a time who truly built the world we've inherited. And isn't that worth remembering next time you dismiss your own dreams as just pizza before bed? As our journey through ancient dream cultures nears its end, let's examine how these beliefs transformed into something resembling modern science, and why we still can't shake their influence today. The bridge between ancient dream interpretation and contemporary psychology is shorter than you might think, paved with equal parts mysticism and meticulous observation. Our story takes a sharp turn in 2nd century AD Ephesus, where the Greek physician Galen, often called the father of modern medicine, made an astonishing claim. Dreams could diagnose illness before physical symptoms appeared. His case studies read like medical detective stories. A merchant dreaming of suffocating was later found to have a lung tumor. A senator's recurring visions of burning feet led to a diabetes diagnosis. A baker's nightmares of being crushed revealed early-stage heart disease. Galen didn't rely on symbolism. He documented physiological links between dream content and bodily imbalances. Dreams of flying? Possibly excess, light humors. Visions of drowning? The kidneys might be struggling. This wasn't mysticism, it was proto-neurology, observing how physical states manifest in sleep imagery. Islamic scholars later expanded this approach. The 11th century Persian polymath Avicenna wrote entire chapters in the canon of medicine about diagnostic dreams, noting how yellow bile imbalances produced angry, fiery dreams. Phlegmatic conditions led to watery or sluggish visions. Blood-related disorders created vivid, chaotic narratives. His treatments often included dream hygiene, adjusting sleep positions, dietary changes, even music therapy to rebalance the body's humors. Sound familiar? It's the medieval version of modern sleep medicine's recommendations for insomnia patients. Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, monasteries became unlikely hubs of dream research. Monks meticulously recorded their visions alongside weather patterns, meals, and prayers, creating the first longitudinal sleep studies. Some discoveries were eerily prescient. A Benedictine monk noted that fasting before bed produced more vivid dreams, now known to correlate with REM sleep. Carmelite nuns observed that full moons disrupted sleep quality. Recent studies confirmed lunar cycle effects. A 14th century French physician linked cheese consumption to nightmares. Modern science identifies tyramine in aged cheeses as a potential trigger. The real game changer came when these traditions collided during the Renaissance. Scholars translating Arabic and Greek texts rediscovered Galen's medical dream theories just as the printing press allowed mass production of dream dictionaries. The result? A scientific revolution where Leonardo da Vinci kept dream journals to spark inventions. Paracelsus used dream analysis alongside chemical medicine. Astronomer Tycho Brahe recorded celestial dreams before major discoveries. This fusion birthed early psychology. When Freud published The Interpretation of Dreams in 1899, he stood on the shoulders of millennia of observation. He just swapped humors for the unconscious and demons for repressed desires. Even his famous Oedipus complex mirrors ancient Greek dream warnings about intimate family visions. Jung took it further, essentially reviving the concept of universal dream symbols. His collective unconscious isn't far from Mesopotamian belief in shared divine messages. Modern sleep labs with EEG machines? They're the technological descendants of Egyptian dream temples where priests monitored breathing patterns. Today's science confirms some ancient intuitions. Diagnostic dreams. Studies show Parkinson's patients often experience violent nightmares years before tremors begin, a neurological warning system Galen would have loved. Problem solving. The German chemist Kekule discovering benzene's ring structure and a snake biting its tail dream echoes ancient inventors consulting dream priests. Emotional processing. fMRI scans proving we process emotions during REM sleep validate Aristotle's theory of dreams as mental digestion. Yet for all our advances, mysteries remain. Why do universal dream symbols persist across cultures? Falling, flying, being chased. How do some dreams predict future events with statistical improbability? Modern science still can't fully explain precognitive dreams reported consistently since Babylonian times. Perhaps this is why ancient dream traditions endure in disguised forms. Athletes visualizing success equals Olympic dream incubation rituals. Therapy addressing recurring nightmares equals Babylonian demon banishing spells. Sleep trackers monitoring REM cycles equals Egyptian temple sleep observations. Even our language preserves these connections. When we say, "I'll sleep on it," we're channeling Roman statesmen who delayed decisions for dream guidance. Follow your dreams originates from medieval artisans trusting creative visions. As we prepare to conclude this journey from medieval kitchens to modern mattresses, consider this. Every night, you participate in humanity's oldest collaborative experiment, the eternal dance between waking life and the mysterious world of dreams. Whether through ancient oil divination or fMRI scans, we're still chasing the same fundamental question. What are these nightly visions trying to tell us? The answer, it seems, is still unfolding, one dream at a time. As we close this journey from medieval feasts to ancient dream temples, let's savor one final thought. Our relationship with dreams mirrors how we've always approached food. Both are fundamental human experiences that we've ritualized, studied, and endlessly reinterpreted across cultures and centuries. Consider the parallels. Just as medieval cooks transformed simple ingredients into nourishing meals, ancient dream interpreters took raw, subconscious material and crafted meaningful narratives. A loaf of bread and a dream interpretation might seem worlds apart, but both required observation, noticing how yeast rises or how dream symbols recur. Technique, kneading dough versus analyzing dream patterns. Tradition, recipes passed down like symbolic dictionaries. The medieval kitchen and the dream temple were both sacred spaces where transformation occurred, grain becoming bread, random images becoming prophecies. And just as every culture developed unique cuisines, they created distinct dream languages. Egyptians saw divine messages in Nile flood dreams. Norse warriors interpreted wolf visions as battle omens. Chinese scholars viewed dragon dreams as career indicators. Yet beneath these differences lay universal human cravings for sustenance, physical and spiritual, for understanding our world, and for connection beyond the mundane. Modern science hasn't eliminated these yearnings, it's given them new forms. Where a medieval baker might pray to Saint Honoré for perfect loaves, today's chefs study food chemistry. Ancient dream priests interpreted visions for kings, while neuroscientists now map brain activity during REM sleep. The methods evolved, but the essential questions remain. What nourishes us? What do our nightly visions mean? How do we live better through these experiences? Perhaps this is why ancient dream practices still whisper in our modern lives. Does sleep on it? Advice echoing Roman senators awaiting dream guidance. Journaling morning dreams like Babylonian merchants tracking symbols. Using meditation to induce lucid dreaming, a secular version of Greek incubation rituals. Even our food culture retains dreamlike elements. Molecular gastronomy plays with perception like surreal dreams. Instagram food trends mirror the symbolic feasts of medieval banquets. The midnight snack? That's just our version of ancient dream induction diets. As you drift off tonight, consider this. You're part of an unbroken chain stretching back to those medieval bakers falling asleep with flour-dusted hands, to Egyptian scribes recording visions by oil lamp, to Babylonian priests scanning the stars for dream meanings. Your dreams, whether forgotten by dawn or remembered vividly, continue humanity's oldest conversation between the conscious and unconscious, the mundane and divine. So whether you're biting into a donut that would make a medieval fritter maker proud, or puzzling over last night's strange dream, remember, you're tasting and dreaming in the footsteps of countless generations before you. And that's perhaps the most comforting thought of all, that in these fundamental human experiences, we're never truly alone across time. Sweet dreams, and may your next snack be as satisfying as the insights you find in sleep's mysterious buffet.